Hundreds of billions of dollars stolen from millions of us, and the collateral damage is unfathomable and all around us. So are you sick of it yet? I know I am. And if you are too, then you're in the right place. Welcome to Corruption Inc. Hey guys, my name is Eric Vaughan. And if you're like me and you're like going through social media, you're going through the internet, you're going through YouTube, and you see all sorts of just like crazy shit being slung left and right and from the left, and you don't know what to think, you don't know what to feel, you don't know why the world is the way that it is, then you're in the right place. I am here because I am sick of everything that's going on in the world, and I'm sick of everybody telling me their version of what it is and having everybody basically prove themselves to be wrong. I happen to have been the writer and director of a 5-part documentary miniseries called The Con, where we went and did a deep dive into all of the corruption on both the corporate and the government side that went into the great financial crisis. We talked to some of the top experts in the entire space who know more about corruption than anybody else out there. And we got to the bottom of what actually happened. If you want to check it out, go to the link below. So Corruption Inc. is a new project that I'm going to be figuring out as we go. I know that what our main objective is to get real good information out there. What are the facts? What is a proper analysis of those facts? And how does that lead to us having some idea as to what the hell's going on out there? That's why we're here, and that's why you're here. So, corruption is not something new. I think we all know that. It's something that's been around as long as humans have been interacting with each other. But it changes its face with new technologies, new social trends, new whatever. That's how the face of corruption ends up switching from one thing to another, and why law enforcement and why governments and why anybody who's trying to figure it out and stop it is always a little bit behind, because the corrupt are always figuring out the newest thing, while the people who are trying to stop corruption are always playing catch up. So if we're lucky here, we'll be able to close that gap a little bit. We'll be able to understand when we're being screwed, understand when we're personally under the gun of like some corrupt fraud who's trying to like take our money, take our time, take our whatever. And at the same time, be able to see what's going on a macro level, what's going on in the nation, or your state or the world. I mean, that's really what we need to do. If we're going to defend ourselves, if we're going to actually do something to end this duopoly, this mess, this political and cultural mess that we have to take our own, part in like saying that we created, then it starts with understanding what the problems are. And I don't care how far left you are, I don't care how far right you are. The ultimate issue is corruption. If you get rid of corruption, full-blown Soviet-style communism can work. If you get rid of corruption, full-blown capitalism could probably work. Whatever system we get to, we can't even get to that argument if we can't handle corruption. So what does corruption look like today? I mean, it looks like so many things. I mean, we can basically look at like the daily practices of any one of a number of banks, right? We can, look at the practices of any one of a number of pharmaceutical companies or oil and gas companies or anything. We can look at how medical device companies are like skirting regulation in order to put items out there for people to purchase and have inserted in their bodies without the government's eye or without anybody's like looking out for your protection. I mean, it's everywhere, and it can be involved with almost anything. So let's just look at the current day. Here we are, 2025. We just inaugurated our new president. And one of the scary things is that just before his inauguration, and I'm not presenting this channel as like being a pro-Republican, pro-Democrat, pro-nothing. I'm pro-us, and I'm pro-truth, and I'm pro getting damn good information out there however I can. And if people on the left end up being proven to be the ones who are corrupt, or the right, combination of both, I don't care, and I don't think you do either. But in this particular case, yes, I'm talking about President number 47, Donald J. Trump. Just before his inauguration, he puts out a meme coin, right? Classic pump and dump. I mean, all the markers are there. He and all of his cronies basically hold on to 80% of it, sell off 20%. It's just classic pump and dump. And he does this right on the eve of his inauguration. And I'll get back to that in just a second. But one thing I really want to point out, now that I'm thinking about it here, is that this is very similar to something that happened like just a month prior to that. I mean, we all remember, what is it, Hot Tua coin? Whatever, Tua coin, I think is what it was called. It was Haley Welch's meme coin. Same thing, right? Same classic pump and dump scheme. Exactly the same as what Donald J. Trump did with Trump coin. And actually with Melania's coin. Same thing. And what happened to her? Haley Welch, that is. I mean, she's in deep trouble. She's being looked at for securities fraud. She's being looked at for, I think, money laundering, and I think wire fraud. Those are big boy felonies. And it's the exact same thing, done the exact same way as what our 47th president did just before his inauguration. Now, just the fact that he made money doing this on the eve of inauguration is bad enough. But what I'm really concerned about is what is the message that sends? I mean, if you are a fraudster, if you're a grifter, if you're a predatory lender, if you're a predatory crypto coin person, if you're involved with those markets and you're in a position to create markets, you're in a position to manipulate markets. I mean, Trump just rang the dinner bell for you. He's basically saying, if you're in a position to screw over regular people, now's the time. During his inauguration, he mentioned something about this being the new golden age of America. I think what he meant to say is that we're coming into a golden age of American corruption. So, what are we going to do about it? Well, understanding the problem is a big part of it. I already mentioned the documentary series. But what we're doing today, just to kind of start things off, get things going, is that we're going to be talking to one of the people that we talked to for that documentary series, a gentleman named Marc Dann, who was the Attorney General of the state of Ohio during the financial crisis. And when we spoke with him, way back in the day because he managed to be one of the only AGs, if not the only AG, to be able to put a criminal conviction together, actual criminal conviction for somebody who perpetrated a crime that contributed to the great financial crisis. Now, it was on the state level, and it was small potatoes. But it's something. And it proved that these crimes could be prosecuted as a criminal case and won. And all the things that we didn't see the federal government do, we saw Ohio do with Marc Dann. So, anyway, we're lucky enough to have him today. My good friend, co-producer of this show, and editor of The Con, Joe Siebert, and I sat down with Marc Dann just a little bit earlier, and we're going to share that conversation with you. So, as promised, we're here with Marc Dann, who of course played a big role in our series, The Con, and he's still out there fighting the fight. How are you doing, Marc?
I'm doing well. I mean, the fight doesn't end, and it looks like we're going to be gearing up for another bath of federal government corruption over the next 4 years.
So a lot of what we were kind of coming into this conversation was about was that we're sort of kicking off, Corruption Inc. Right now, and a lot of what we're doing with Corruption Inc. is based on our work, The Con, which of course you had a really big part in, and so we were kind of like just wanting to start by going back to that first episode, the very first time that we got ourselves out there, in this particular space, and just look back on it for a second and say, okay, how well did this age to a certain extent? And I got to tell you, when I was rewatching it just recently, and I was texting to Joe, just saying that, oh my gosh, what did we do here? It's like I'm getting all pissed off all over again, and
Yeah, it's like we put it together, and then it's like you step away from it for a minute, and then you come back and you like get all pissed off again, like you've never seen it before. And yeah, it's I'm curious. You got in Mark, you got a chance to rewatch it?
Yeah, I did, and look, I mean, what's I think changed, at least in the clients and the people that I deal with on a day to day basis, is that there are fewer and fewer people that have the naivete of Addie Polk, who just believed that the institutions of this country were going to work 7 days a week, 365 days a year to protect her from predators, and never had any doubt that somehow this was all her fault. And I think that if anything's better, at least the people that I deal with come into my office or into a case that we bring with a lot more skepticism about how this could happen. That people are not surprised
well,
that these institutions are going to fail them. Well, I think, well, I mean, look, Bernie Sanders had that message, over 3 cycles. And Donald Trump has adopted that message, that these institutions are failing you. Unfortunately, his solution is to just sell them out for his own benefit. So it's a totally different approach. But so yeah, I mean that's what struck me is I don't run into people anymore that really believe that if you play by the rules and do what you're told, that you're going to be treated fairly. I think there's a lot less sense of that than there was back in 2009, 2000. Certainly 2005, six, when a lot of those loans in the con were originated, and certainly in 2008 and nine, when people were starting to understand as it all became unraveled. And I don't think, maybe if Addie had this had happened to her now, she might have saved her life.
Yeah. And just for people who don't know or who haven't seen episode one, Addie Polk is really our number one showcase of a victim who was the prime target of these mortgage companies. She was elderly. She was targeted by Countrywide, who was a big mortgage lender in California. She ends up getting, these taking out these mortgages that, when we suspect, unbeknownst to her, fraudulently by a loan officer, ends up taking her own life the day that the sheriff's department comes to evict her from her home because she doesn't know what's going on. All based on fraud. And one of the things that strikes me the most still is one of the lines from her pastor, who said the reason that this happened to Addie Polk was because she came up in an era when you trusted banks. That if you didn't trust anybody in your community, you trusted the bank. Right? That whole like "It's a Wonderful Life" idea. And yeah, to your point, Mark, I wonder to like I don't hear that sentiment coming from any demographic today.
But what's really interesting, though, is that I was just looking it up earlier today, that the asset-backed securities are now up to, I think that 289 billion were written last year, or up to, no, to 2024 to date. And a lot of those are including commercial real estate and like and a lot of like rental-backed securities, lease-backed securities, and that sort of thing. And so it's not as if, even with this skepticism, that the numbers are collapsing. In fact, they're very much not. So, in this modern milieu, Mark, how is it that people are still, finding themselves in positions where they're being made vulnerable?
Well, desperation. I mean, part of the secret sauce of what happened in 2008, in my view, remember, credit card debt was at its highest place in history of the country at that time. Um, and a lot of the Eddie Pokes of the world were persuaded to remortgage their homes to pay off credit card debt. That, by the way, was also securitized in exactly the same way as the asset-backed securities were. So that debt was all belonged to Wall Street, and they used it to pay. And now people are continue to be in a position of being desperate, or we see it all the time now with payday loans. I was just down in Columbus testifying against a bill to raise the interest rates on short-term loans of 6 months or more, that can't be renewed, or can only be renewed every 6 months instead of every week, like payday loans. In most states don't have much regulation on payday lenders either at this point. But people, look, you gotta, when the car breaks down and you live in most parts of Ohio, you can't get to work unless you have a car. There's not public transportation. You can't walk. You can't rely on neighbors. You can't get an Uber in lots of places. And so you have to, that people have the same, in fact, and perhaps at the bottom level of the economy, have a more desperate sense of urgency. So they're going to do what they have to do to feed their family, or to get to work, or to or to meet a medical bill and get the medical treatment that they need. I say to clients all the time, how dare you get sick in America? Which leads them, potentially almost, so frequently to bankruptcy, or to really overwhelming debt that they have. So the life factors that were causing people to make these decisions to begin with, or driving them, um, are still there, and there's an unending willingness to commit fraud on consumers in this country, that just doesn't seem to want to end.
So is it kind of the case that naivety has been replaced by desperation, so basically people are getting themselves into trouble with, financially, knowingly, because they
Right.
have no choice.
Right.
Well,
Well, and because yeah, and I think I talked about this. I don't know if it made it into the con or not, but I remember being in the state senate, and we were they wanted to preempt. Cleveland had a pretty good predatory lending law that would have prohibited things like the situation that happened to Addie Pope, and the state wanted to preempt that with really no regulation of this mortgage origination. And I just remember the parade of bankers from the brick and mortar banks coming into my office, Key Bank and National City Bank at the time. These were large, these were kind of the second tier largest banks, Ohio based, Fifth Third, based in Ohio, US Bank based in Ohio, coming to my office. They're lobbyists. I'm like, I've got great news for you. We're going to beat this bill, and then, or even make it a statewide requirement that loans not be predatory, and then all these consumers will beat a path to your bank where you would never consider doing something so awful, as originating a loan where the value of the property was inflated, or using appraisers who were unethical, or and I 3 or 4 different conversations where they say, Senator Dan, you don't understand. We're for preempting this law. We're against the predatory lending law in Ohio, because later, and I couldn't for the life of me ever understand it. And then I found out as the crisis unfolded, that they all had their own subsidiaries doing the same thing. National City had a subsidiary. Key Bank did. So did PNC, which ultimately ended up acquiring National City Bank. So they all did it. And here's the worst part. And here's why this cycle is hard. Without strong federal and state regulation, this cycle's just going to continue, because ethical competitors are going to get their ass kicked by people who are cheating, unless those people who are cheating are held accountable. And so when we live in a world that doesn't happen, then they owe it to their shareholders to cheat, or they're going to get sued by their shareholders for not doing a good job of managing their company. So all the financial incentives remain the same to commit this kind of fraud, and it's ongoing. And just today, I know you want to make this a timeless thing, but it's the end of the Senate. U.S. Senate Sherrod Brown warned the world today. I don't know if anybody saw it, to not let them gut the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, which is one of the good things that came out of the 2008 financial crisis. It is an agency that has been chipping away at that fraud. It's been causing unethical business operators to think a minute before they move forward. People like Wells Fargo, people like payday lenders, and banks who want to chunk on huge bounce check fees to people, or to reorder their checks, so that they make sure that they bounce some every time that there's that they have a little cash flow blip in their account. Elon Musk, on behalf of President Trump, has said he wants to get rid of the CFPB. Now, fortunately, the Congress needs to do that, and hopefully they'll take Senator Brown's advice and continue to understand that how badly that will hurt their constituents. But I don't know, and frankly, many of the people that voted for Trump are the ones that have had the protection of the CFPB, and for whom there's no longer 300% 7-day loans in their communities anymore, because of the work that they've done. So I don't know what's going to happen, but if you take what regulation did come out of the financial crisis away from the mix, all you got left are the financial incentives to cheat, which are exactly the same as they were before.
Mark, isn't it true you mentioned that it would take Congress to actually disband the CFPB, but we all remember Donald Trump appoints Mick Mulvaney to head the CFPB, and that's one of the cute tricks that you could do as an executive, right? Is to the institution is still there, but you can appoint somebody to lead it who's going to essentially dismantle it from the inside. Is that something that
Personnel is policy?
Yeah,
that's right. But fortunately, to some extent, we in the 4 years they had before, and I think if they made a concerted effort anywhere in the federal government to enact a 2020 2025 like plan, it was at the CFPB, and they didn't get very far in repealing some of the protective regulations. But in 4 years, or if there's a 8-year stint of that kind of leadership, all of that stuff could be decimated from the inside out. And those certainly the fear of any enforcement action, and that's what really changed under Trump. While the regs remained the same, the fear of any enforcement action by the government went away. Fortunately, in Elizabeth Warren's foresight, when she invented the CFPB, they created many aspects of their regulations and structures that allow for a private right of action, to allow private attorneys general like me to bring those cases, and so we're not going to stop. We're going to be but once again, I'll feel again like we're the last line of defense against them. Funny story. They were threatening for a couple of years during the Trump administration to CFPB keeps a terrific database of bad behavior by financial service companies. And if you haven't looked at it, even if you don't have a particular issue, it's really a well thought out, easily accessible database. I actually took to downloading that database on a weekly basis because they kept threatening to shut it down. And we rely on that information to determine whether something that's happening to one of our clients might just be a one-off situation where something went wrong, or whether it's a pattern in practice of these companies. So I can easily see them doing something like that. I'm going to have to call my data guy again, and start to buy that data and store it. I mean, just to store it on the cloud costs money, but at the end of the day, somebody's got to do it, and we have to. And that data is so valuable So it's little things like that, and it's creating a world and an environment where the expectation is that the government is going to be there to help, that there's going to be somebody to call when the shit hits the fan in your life. And I think there's a lot of folks that would like to just take that away. So it is scary.
Well, that's really interesting, because that's one of the things that, as you were talking, that just came to mind. It's like, what does it say about our political leadership that the CFPB of all things would be such a target?
Yeah, well, it says that many of the folks that wrote them campaign checks are people who are regulated by the CFPB, and they had a clear. They saw what Trump's administration did 4 years ago, and they saw it again. I think you're seeing the same thing with cryptocurrency and the SEC. They're going to that agency is at probably a greater risk because they attempted to put some regulation on the sale of crypto, which is a commodity, a security. It's a traditional type of thing that with a public marketplace that requires the oversight of government for it to function equitably and ethically and legally. And they're gonna gut the SEC. That's their plan. They're very, very clear about it.
Mark, I wanted to ask, going back to something you mentioned earlier about the lobbyists coming to your office and your assumption that they were coming to, represent the ethical contingent of the industry, and then you realize that, oh no, they actually are hoping that you'll collaborate with them in a backdoor deal on this fraud that they want to perpetrate. Speak to, I think one of the things that's, to my mind, still stands in the way of people really understanding why these issues are important is they see Fifth Third Bank on the corner of the block that they pass every day, or they see Citibank, or they see whatever, and or Wells Fargo, and maybe you hear a little bit in the news here or there about something that could be chalked up as shenanigans, but I really think the average person at the end of the day goes into these banks and they don't really understand the enormity of the intent to defraud, or the willingness of seemingly well-respected people, as you said, in the con and bespoke suits on Wall Street, who are looking at them as, sheep ready to fleece. And could you speak a little bit to, I think the whole idea of I feel like people don't understand why an agency like the CFPB is so important, because they don't really understand the true depths of willingness to commit crimes against them by these high-level individuals. And I just wanted you to speak to that a little bit, and from your experience.
Yeah. So we're currently lead counsel on 2 cases against Wells Fargo. Actually, we're part of the leadership on a 3rd case against Wells Fargo. In one case, they were now this is in addition to the scandal a few years ago where they were opening their own accounts for their customers without their permission. And the reason they did that is because their managers all had incentives. Their pay was based on how many of these accounts they opened, and so they did that. Well, it became known now that that they are opening, and our clients started getting letters from Wells Fargo saying, "We're really sorry. 10 years ago, we bought you credit life insurance without your permission. We bought you credit protection. We bought you accidental disability life insurance, stuff that no rational person would buy." And certainly people who didn't have the means wouldn't want to be taking $10 and $20 a month out of their checking account or their credit card account to buy, and didn't have any business having. And we're really sorry. Here's a check. Here's for what we stole from you, plus some interest, plus a little bit for your aggravation. I think they call it a courtesy bonus or something like that. And it turns out that there may be over 1 million of these accounts that just one company opened. And when you're thinking about, and they were with third parties that they bought them from, so they were getting a commission. But even if it's $10 a month, and even if they're getting $1 a month of that in commission, times a million, times times a million customers, I mean that's that's hundreds of millions of dollars over the past several years that went into Wells Fargo's pocket, let alone their co-conspirators, the insurance companies that also pocketed a nice profit on that. And of course, there was no risk people were going to make claims on these policies because they didn't know they had them. And so that made it even more profitable for them. Well, turns out that the only reason that Wells Fargo is sending out those apology letters is because the Federal Reserve, along with the CFPB and the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, are going through every spreadsheet and that Wells Fargo has before they'll release them from an order that prohibits them from acquiring new assets. And this is really holding back. Wells Fargo has been very profitable even during this time, but from becoming even more profitable, they're limited. They can't buy new banks. They can't acquire new assets at all. And they're trying to get out of that and to get out from those orders. And so this is the only reason they're apologizing and sending checks is because a government agency made them do it. And that's, it's a sad commentary on what's going on. Same thing with loan modification. So you go back to the folks in the con and how a lot of those predatory loans ended up being resolved in very imperfect system under of the TARP bailout that took place. A lot of those loan modifications, they same thing. They're sending letters to people saying, "We're really sorry. We made an error in calculating your loan modification. You've been overpaying us by X dollars a month. Here's the money back with interest and a little bit for an apology. We're sorry we got caught." And we didn't say we got caught. They just said this is our, they're doing it because I discovered this error in that. So that's the case. And I don't know how many. We don't know how many people are in that class, but there's going to be hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people affected by that. And it's again. If you're stealing $20 or $30 a year from a million people, that becomes real money, and over time, billions and billions of dollars. And so these very profitable companies they're profitable because they're exploiting the people who aren't paying. And again, should people have my clients aren't accountants. They aren't, they aren't bankers. And then when they were getting their loan modified, when they were behind and just wanted to be regular mortgage paying homeowners again, they didn't have time to do the math or the ability or anybody to the ones that didn't hire us to even check to see that the math was right in these things. And so I don't know how you can protect yourself. And that's the kind of thing that government needs to protect people from at times in their life when they need that protection.
Well, I think that I know that we're running short on time for you, but it just brings up one last little thing that I wanted to talk about was so we hear so much about trying to shrink government, and quite often when they say that means however strapped for both personnel or cash a lot of these regulatory agencies are going to be. When I hear that, what I hear is that more and more of these regulatory cops being pulled off the beat, making it even more difficult to find these small, the person by person small, transgressions, but writ large, as you said, if it's $20 per person over a million people, that becomes massive. And these large companies,
And it's not just Wells Fargo. It's Citibank. It's Bank of America. It's Fifth Third. It's Huntington Bank. It's everybody. Everybody's doing.
So how does I can't remember the other government efficiency guy, can never remember his name, was saying that
Ramaswamy.
Yeah, was that his method was going to be to basically take 50% of everybody who's in government and just send them their papers. What would that do to our ability to protect consumers from these really difficult to detect frauds?
Right. I mean, our complaint in 2000, in the con at the time that was made was that, was the revolving door. The fact that the people that were doing the regulating were then leaving and going to work for the folks that they were regulating. And that was a huge part of the reason, that to this day, financial criminals are very rarely prosecuted in this country because they are ultimately being prosecuted by lawyers who want to work for them after they leave, or in the case of the bond rating agencies and the bond rating, the only dream of a bond rating agency employee was to become an investment bank employee, and triple their salary, and to be able to move on from that. So you have that kind of subtle, but if you just take all the cops off the beat, and those that are left are those that have a favorable view of the industry, that are not even embarrassed that it's a revolving door, and that they're going to go out and work for the people that they're regulating. We're going to have a crisis that's going to make 2009 look like a picnic.
Well, on that note,
Apologize.
all right, no, we asked for it, but just wanted to thank you again, and for speaking with us here, and thanks for all the valuable insights that you gave us when we were making the con, and then again for today.
Yeah.
Thanks. Sorry I talk so much, but this is obviously something I'm very passionate about. So thank you for continuing the dialogue and continuing the fight.
Yep.
Oh, we're glad you're out there. Take care, Marc.
That's it. All right, that was Marc Dann, former AG of the state of Ohio, and he's still fighting the good fight.
Still fighting the good fight, and I'm glad he and many other people like him are out there, because it's needed more than ever. Because I think one thing that's like abundantly clear is that with every single iteration of these crime sprees, right, that occur, whether it's savings and loan or any of the other ones, the .com bubbles, you name it, is that the lack of doing anything about it in any kind of substantive level just makes it worse.
Mm-hmm.
Just makes it worse. And I think that because of so many different things, because of, price gouging, amidst an inflationary period, on top of like all these other, on top of like artificially inflated home prices and all these other things, have made it so that however much, we may have been making at one point in time, that money is a lot less now because of that. And because of that, that puts so many people, I mean, it's like, I think that the federal like poverty level officially is like 40,000 for a family of 4 or something like that. I mean, I don't know what the statistic is at this point, but you have to think that like on any kind of a realistic basis,
Yeah.
when you throw in all those other things, you're making it more difficult for many, for people probably 60, 70, 80, I mean, thousand to make ends meet.
Yeah.
And when that's the case, that's where that desperation that Marc was talking about comes from.
Yeah.
We all feel that bite, but
yeah, people are willing to, and that's it struck me when he talked about the kind of the evolution of, during Addie's time, you trusted the bank. Nobody trusts banks anymore, but because people are more and more desperate, they're willing to kind of put, they're kind of willing to check some skepticism at the door, because it's like, what other choice do they have?
Oh, right. But I mean, you have to, but I always have to ground myself again, because so often, especially during the 2008 era, so many of these people who were going door to door were themselves, being manipulated because of their circumstances.
Right.
Young people who had terrible jobs, who in their own right were desperate for money, were being given this opportunity, and then at the same time being trained
Mm-hmm.
and told that
you're providing homes for people who can't afford them. I mean, how is that not a great thing? And so it's the pernicious sort of aspect of corruption, of elite corruption, that I think is ultimately what we're talking about, with the con and with like this overarching concept of Corruption Inc. is that this corruption comes from the top.
Yeah.
They corrupt their own institutions in ways that the people who are underneath them might not even understand.
Yeah.
And it's just all different forms of manipulating people of lesser means or lesser abilities or whatever it might be. I mean, it's exploitation on a macro level.
Right.
And I think that's what Marc's talking about. And, I'm glad he's still fighting the fight out there. I wish he didn't have to fight so hard.
Yeah. Yeah, I do too. And so, yeah, I'm looking forward to getting more guests like him to come on and talk about, because to your point, the fish rots from the head. And I think the more people can see and understand that it's the people who control these institutions and the people who have the power who are able to manipulate entire companies and organizations, and that it's a well orchestrated scheme that is done with intent, and that these frauds just don't come out of nowhere, and they're not oopsies, and they're not, because that's the other thing I always remember in episode 1 of, or was it, I don't know if it was 1 or 2, but like Roland Arnall, like when he was being deposed over, when his company came down, it was, Roland Arnall was this CEO of a company called Ameriquest who had been defrauding customers, and was the largest mortgage fraud of its time until, it escalated even further to 2008. But his deposition in front of Congress, he was saying, we had some rogue employees, we rooted them out. I had no idea this was going on, and we let them go, and we dealt with it. And what I hope comes out more and more as we talk to people on the inside of these companies,
Right.
is that it becomes clear that that's just a load of horse shit. And they do it every time, they say it every time, but when you hear the person at the top obfuscating and diverting attention to and blame to people who were under them and saying like, oh, I didn't see any of this, they were operating in the shadows, and these nefarious underlings of mine,
Right. All right. Well,
yeah. So that does it for our first trial run of Corruption Inc.
thanks for going through the slog with us.
Yeah, we're getting our bearings, we're figuring this thing out, but yeah, we're excited. We're gonna make it happen. We're gonna talk to some incredible folks, and we're going to just keep focused on corruption, because there's no shortage.
Hey all, become that person nobody dares to argue with. Hit like, subscribe, and that little bell button for notifications. Talk to you soon.